In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the sky and dreams often got lost in the shuffle of daily life, there lived a woman named Angela Davis. Angela was not someone people noticed at first glance. She moved quietly through her days, or rather her nights, cleaning offices after everyone else had gone home. Her job wasn't glamorous. It involved scrubbing floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down desks until they gleamed under fluorescent lights. But Angela didn't mind. She took pride in what she did because even if no one saw her work, she knew she made a difference. Every evening, Angela would step into the towering glass building on Fifth Avenue, pulling her cart filled with cleaning supplies behind her. The lobby buzzed during the day with sharp-dressed executives rushing to meetings, but by the time Angela arrived, it was silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning. She liked the quiet. It gave her space to think, to reflect on her life, and sometimes just to dream. Angela had big dreams once, though now they felt like distant memories buried beneath years of struggle. Years ago, before fate dealt her a hard hand, Angela had been different. She grew up loving languages, devouring books in French, Spanish, and even Mandarin. Her teachers called her gifted, saying she had an ear for picking up accents and a knack for understanding cultures. Back then, she dreamed of becoming a translator, or maybe even working in international relations. Life, however, had other plans. When her father fell ill and medical bills piled up, Angela dropped out of college to take care of her family. Jobs were scarce, and the ones available didn't pay well. Eventually, she found herself cleaning offices to make ends meet. Over time, her dreams faded, replaced by the harsh realities of survival. Despite everything, Angela never lost her love for languages. On breaks, she'd sit alone in the break room and practice phrases in French or try to remember old Chinese proverbs she'd learned as a teenager. Sometimes, when she passed documents left on desks, she'd glance at them, wondering what they said in another tongue. These little moments kept a part of her alive, the part that believed she was more than just a cleaning lady. One chilly November night, Angela entered the corner office of Richard Langston, a famous film director known for his arrogance as much as his success. His desk was always cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and scripts. Tonight was no exception. As Angela began tidying up, she heard voices coming from his phone, which he'd left on speaker. Richard was talking to someone about a new project, a foreign film he planned to remake without hiring translators or consultants. Who needs them? He boasted loudly. If I can't figure it out myself, then why bother? Angela froze mid-motion, gripping the handle of her mop tightly. She recognized the tone in his voice. It was dismissive, condescending. It reminded her of all the times people assumed she was less intelligent simply because of her job or the color of her skin. She wanted to say something, anything, but instead she stayed silent, pretending not to hear. Unfortunately, Richard noticed her standing there. With a smirk, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Oh, hey, cleaning lady. If you're so smart, translate it." His laughter rang out, filling the empty office like a cruel echo. For a moment, Angela felt heat rise to her cheeks. Humiliation burned inside her chest, but she quickly pushed it down. She forced herself to nod politely and continued working, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Still, his words lingered long after she finished cleaning and headed home. They replayed in her mind as she rode the subway, staring blankly at the advertisements plastered on the walls. By the time she reached her small apartment, anger had replaced embarrassment. Who did he think he was? And why did he feel entitled to mock her? That night, sleep eluded Angela. She tossed and turned, replaying the conversation in her head. At some point, frustration turned into determination. Why should she let someone like Richard Langston define her worth? She had skills he clearly lacked, and maybe it was time to remind herself of that. Sitting upright in bed, Angela grabbed a notebook and pen from her bedside table. For hours, she scribbled furiously, jotting down phrases and sentences in multiple languages. Each word felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, dusting off parts of her identity she thought she'd lost forever. By morning, Angela felt lighter, as if she'd shed a weight she'd been carrying for years. She didn't know yet how far this newfound resolve would take her. But one thing was certain. She refused to let anyone belittle her again. Little did she know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would change not only her life, but also the lives of those around her. All it took was one reckless comment from a man who thought too highly of himself, and one brave woman willing to prove him wrong. The next few days passed in a blur for Angela. Every night as she cleaned the offices, her mind raced with thoughts of what she had started. She couldn't stop thinking about Richard Langston's mocking words and how they had ignited something inside her, a fire she hadn't felt in years. That notebook, filled with scribbled translations and half-formed ideas, became her secret weapon. It wasn't just about proving Richard wrong anymore. It was about proving something to herself. Each evening after finishing her cleaning duties, Angela would sit in the dimly lit break room with a cup of coffee she brought from home. She'd pull out scraps of paper and notes she'd jotted down during her shifts. Sometimes these scraps were snippets of dialogue from the foreign script Richard had carelessly left on his desk. Other times, they were phrases she overheard while passing by open doors or tidying up meeting rooms. Angela didn't have access to the full screenplay, but she pieced together what she could, translating line by line, word by word. Her knowledge of languages came flooding back faster than she expected. French rolled off her tongue effortlessly. Spanish flowed naturally, and even Mandarin, which she hadn't spoken in years, returned to her like an old friend. As she worked, Angela realized this wasn't just about translation. It was about understanding. She poured her heart into capturing the emotions behind the words, making sure every phrase carried the weight it deserved. By the end of the week, she had translated nearly half the script she'd managed to gather. Angela's hands trembled as she wrote the last sentence of her latest translation. She stared at the pages spread across the small table in her apartment, her heart pounding. What was she doing? Was this foolish, or was it brave? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. She couldn't turn back now. The act of translating gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. It reminded her of who she used to be, a woman full of potential, someone capable of more than scrubbing floors and emptying trash bins. Meanwhile, Richard Langston remained oblivious to Angela's efforts. He strutted through the office during the day, barking orders at assistants and boasting about his upcoming project. To him, the foreign film was just another opportunity to add to his already impressive portfolio. He didn't care about accuracy or authenticity. He cared about box office numbers and awards. His arrogance blinded him to the fact that someone right under his nose might hold the key to unlocking the story's true essence. One fateful evening, Angela's secret almost came undone. While cleaning a conference room, she noticed a stack of papers lying on the table, pages from the original screenplay. Her breath caught in her throat. This was her chance to get closer to completing the translation. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she quickly snapped photos of the pages with her phone. Her heart raced as she slipped the device back into her pocket, knowing she was taking a huge risk. If anyone found out, she could lose her job or worse. But the thought of quitting never crossed her mind. She had come too far to stop now. Back at home, Angela carefully reviewed the new material. The script was richer and more complex than she had imagined. There were layers of meaning woven into the dialogue, cultural references that only someone familiar with the language and its nuances could fully grasp. Angela dove into the task with renewed energy, determined to do justice to the original work. She stayed up late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and sheer determination. By the time dawn broke, her eyes were bloodshot, but her spirit was soaring. As the days turned into weeks, Angela's confidence grew. She began to see patterns in Richard's behavior, the way he dismissed those he deemed beneath him, the way he assumed everyone shared his narrow worldview. It made her angry, but it also motivated her to keep going. She wanted to show him that intelligence wasn't defined by wealth or status. It was something deeper, something innate, and she intended to prove it. Unbeknownst to Angela, her actions were about to ripple outward in ways she couldn't predict. One afternoon, as Richard sat in his office reviewing notes for the project, his assistant walked in holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Mr. Langston," she said hesitantly, "I found this on my desk. I think it belongs to you." Richard took the paper and unfolded it, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. It was a page of dialogue from the foreign script, but translated into flawless English. At the bottom of the page, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "If you're so smart, translate it." Richard's jaw tightened. He recognized the phrase immediately. It was the same taunt he had thrown at the cleaning lady weeks ago. For a moment, he felt a flicker of unease. Who had done this? And why? He demanded answers from his assistant, but she swore she didn't know where it came from. Frustrated and intrigued, Richard decided to investigate further. Little did he know, his search for the truth would lead him straight to Angela and force him to confront his own biases in ways he never anticipated. For Angela, the stakes were higher than ever. She knew it was only a matter of time before her involvement came to light. But instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had nothing to hide and everything to gain. If Richard wanted a translator, she would give him one, but on her terms. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Richard Langston was not used to being confused. As a man who prided himself on having all the answers, the mysterious translation left him unsettled. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was mocking him, but he couldn't figure out who or why. The neatly written words haunted him, not just because of their accuracy, but because they carried a tone of quiet defiance. It was as if the person behind them knew something about him that he didn't want anyone to see. His arrogance, his ignorance, his unwillingness to admit when he needed help. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Richard began snooping around the office. He grilled his assistant, questioned interns, and even confronted members of his production team. But no one seemed to know anything about the translated pages. Frustrated, he decided to take matters into his own hands. That evening, instead of leaving like he usually did, Richard stayed late, hiding in his office with the lights off. He wanted to catch whoever had been sneaking around his desk or going through his papers. If there was one thing Richard hated more than incompetence, it was secrecy. Angela arrived at her usual time, pushing her cart down the silent hallways. She had no idea Richard was watching her from the shadows of his office. Her heart raced as she approached his door, knowing full well the stack of translated pages she'd tucked into her bag earlier could ruin everything if discovered. Still, she reminded herself why she was doing this. Not for revenge, but for justice. She deserved to be seen for who she truly was, not dismissed because of where she worked or how much money she made. As Angela entered Richard's office, she moved quickly and quietly, tidying up as usual. She avoided looking directly at his desk, though her mind kept drifting back to the original script pages she'd photographed days ago. She hadn't finished translating them yet, but she was close. So close. Just as she bent down to pick up a stray coffee cup, the overhead lights flicked on, startling her. Richard stepped out from behind his desk, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp and accusing. Angela froze, her pulse pounding in her ears. For a split second she considered lying, but then she remembered the notebook in her bag, the one filled with translations. There was no point denying it now. Slowly she straightened up, meeting his gaze with steady eyes. "I'm cleaning," she said simply, refusing to let her voice waver. Richard narrowed his eyes. Cleaning or stealing? He gestured toward her bag, which hung loosely from her shoulder. Angela hesitated, unsure of what to say next. Finally, she reached inside and pulled out the notebook, holding it up for him to see. "You told me to translate it," she said, her tone calm but firm. "So here it is." Richard stared at her, disbelief washing over his face. He snatched the notebook from her hand and began flipping through the pages. With each line he read, his expression shifted, from skepticism to surprise, and finally, to awe. The translations were flawless, capturing every nuance of the original text. They weren't just accurate, they were poetic, breathing life into the story in ways Richard hadn't thought possible. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely humbled. But humility wasn't an emotion Richard handled well. Instead of thanking Angela, he lashed out. "Who do you think you are?" he snapped, his voice tinged with both anger and embarrassment. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused?" Angela stood her ground, refusing to back down. "I'm the person you mocked," she replied evenly. "The person you assumed was too stupid to understand anything beyond mopping floors. But guess what? I'm also the person who can save your project from disaster." Her words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Deep down, he knew she was right. Without these translations, his remake would have been shallow and uninspired. A pale imitation of the original. And yet, admitting that meant acknowledging his own shortcomings, something he wasn't ready to do. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. Finally, Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost weary. "Would you have listened?" Angela countered. When Richard didn't answer, she continued, "People like you don't listen to people like me. You assume we're invisible, replaceable, but we're not. We have skills, talents, and dreams just like everyone else." Richard didn't respond right away. He looked at Angela, really looked at her for the first time. Before tonight, she had been nothing more than a faceless employee, someone whose name he probably wouldn't have recognized. Now he saw a woman who had faced countless obstacles, yet refused to give up. A woman who had proven him wrong in the most unexpected way. After what felt like an eternity, Richard nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" Angela blinked, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected him to offer her anything. "I don't want anything," she admitted. "I just wanted to prove that I'm more than what you see." Richard frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "That's not good enough," he muttered. After a pause, he added, "You've done incredible work here." "Incredible. I can't ignore that." He paced the room, thinking hard. Then turning back to Angela, he said, "How would you feel about working on this project with me? As a consultant?" Angela's jaw dropped. Was he serious? A part of her wanted to laugh, while another part wondered if this was some kind of trick. But when she looked into Richard's eyes, she saw sincerity, or at least the closest thing to it he could muster. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "All right," she said cautiously. "But only if you promise to treat me with respect." Richard hesitated before nodding. "Deal." And just like that, Angela's life changed forever. What started as an act of defiance became an opportunity she never imagined possible. Over the coming weeks, she found herself sitting in meetings she once cleaned up after, offering insights that left seasoned professionals speechless. Her knowledge of languages and cultures transformed the project, earning her praise from colleagues and respect from Richard, even if he still struggled to fully acknowledge his mistakes. But Angela didn't care about accolades or recognition. For her, this was about more than just proving herself. It was about showing others like her that no matter how small or invisible the world makes you feel, your voice matters. Your talent matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave moment to change everything, for yourself and for those around you. Angela's new role as a cultural consultant on Richard Langston's project felt like stepping into another world. One day, she was mopping floors and emptying trash bins. The next, she was sitting in sleek conference rooms, surrounded by people who spoke confidently about budgets, timelines, and creative vision. At first, Angela felt out of place. She wore the same clothes she always did, simple jeans and practical shoes, while everyone else dressed in tailored suits or designer outfits. But as the days went by, she realized that what she brought to the table was far more valuable than any expensive wardrobe. Her presence quickly became indispensable. When discussions turned to how certain scenes should be adapted for an English-speaking audience, Angela chimed in with insights that no one else had considered. She explained cultural references embedded in the original script, pointing out subtle details that would have been lost without her input. For example, there was a scene where two characters exchanged polite greetings in Mandarin, a seemingly minor moment that carried deep meaning about their relationship. Without Angela's explanation, the filmmakers might have cut it entirely, thinking it wasn't important. Richard, too, began to rely on Angela more than he cared to admit. He still struggled with humility, often brushing off her suggestions at first only to realize later how right she was. Slowly but surely, his attitude toward her shifted. Where once he had mocked her, now he listened intently when she spoke. It wasn't perfect. He still interrupted her occasionally or dismissed her ideas before reconsidering. But Angela noticed the change, and she decided to give him credit for trying. The rest of the team, however, didn't need convincing. They welcomed Angela with open arms, marveling at her depth of knowledge and her ability to bridge gaps between cultures. Some of them even started seeking her advice outside of work-related matters. One young intern, Mia, confided in Angela about her struggles learning Spanish. "I just don't get the grammar," Mia admitted during a lunch break. Angela smiled warmly and spent the next hour breaking down verb conjugations in a way that made sense. By the end of their conversation, Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You're amazing," she said earnestly. "Thank you." Word of Angela's contribution spread beyond the office. Friends and family were astonished when she told them about her new position. Her mother, who had supported Angela through years of hardship, cried tears of joy over the phone. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "I always knew." Even Angela's neighbors, who often saw her coming home late after long nights of cleaning, began treating her differently. Instead of pitying her, they looked up to her, asking questions about her work and congratulating her on her success. But not everyone reacted positively. As news of Angela's rise traveled, some people grew jealous or resentful. A few co-workers muttered under their breath, accusing her of getting special treatment because of guilt or pity. Others questioned whether she truly deserved her new role, implying that her background somehow disqualified her from being taken seriously. Angela heard the whispers but chose to ignore them. She focused instead on doing her job well, knowing that actions spoke louder than words. One particularly challenging moment came during a meeting with investors. The room buzzed with energy as Richard presented the progress of the film. Angela sat quietly in the corner, listening attentively. When one investor asked why so much emphasis was placed on cultural authenticity, Richard gestured for Angela to answer. Standing up nervously, she took a deep breath and began explaining the importance of staying true to the source material. She spoke passionately about how audiences craved stories that felt real and relatable, regardless of language barriers. Her words resonated deeply, silencing skeptics and earning nods of approval. Still, moments like these weren't easy. Every time Angela stepped into a leadership role, she faced reminders of how far she had come and how much further she needed to go. There were days when self-doubt crept in, whispering cruel lies about her worthiness. On those days, she reminded herself of the notebook she'd carried around for weeks, filled with translations born out of defiance and determination. That notebook symbolized everything she stood for: resilience, courage, and the belief that intelligence knows no boundaries. As production moved forward, Angela found herself spending less time cleaning and more time collaborating. Richard officially reassigned her duties, allowing her to focus solely on the project. Though grateful, Angela missed the simplicity of her old routine. Cleaning had given her solitude, a chance to think without distractions. Now her days were packed with meetings, emails, and endless conversations. Despite the challenges, she thrived in her new environment, proving to herself and others that she belonged exactly where she was. Her growing confidence also inspired bold decisions. One afternoon, while reviewing a key scene, Angela suggested casting actors who spoke the original language fluently, rather than relying on subtitles or dubbing. "It will make the story feel authentic," she argued. "Audiences respect honesty." At first, Richard resisted, worried about alienating viewers unfamiliar with the language. But Angela persisted, presenting research and examples to support her case. Eventually, he agreed, and the decision paid off. Test screenings showed overwhelmingly positive reactions, with many praising the film's commitment to cultural integrity. Through it all, Angela never forgot where she came from. She continued mentoring interns like Mia, sharing tips and encouragement whenever she could. She also advocated for fair wages and better working conditions for janitorial staff, using her newfound influence to push for change within the company. Though Richard initially balked at the idea, citing budget constraints, Angela persuaded him by highlighting the long-term benefits of investing in employees. "Happy workers are productive workers," she said firmly. To her surprise, he listened and implemented several of her recommendations. By the time filming wrapped, Angela had transformed not only the project, but also herself. She walked taller, spoke louder, and carried herself with a quiet strength that commanded respect. People no longer saw her as the cleaning lady. They saw her as Angela Davis, a talented linguist and cultural expert whose contributions shaped the heart and soul of the film. And though Richard still struggled to fully acknowledge his past behavior, his actions spoke volumes. He ensured Angela received proper credit for her work, both publicly and financially, setting her up for future opportunities. Looking back, Angela realized how much she had grown since that fateful night when Richard's mockery sparked a fire inside her. What started as an act of defiance had become a journey of self-discovery, teaching her that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can lead to the greatest victories. But this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. As the film neared completion, Angela found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in such a short time. The project that once seemed like an impossible mountain to climb was now almost finished, and she could hardly believe the role she had played in bringing it to life. Each day brought new challenges, but also new triumphs. For the first time in years, Angela felt truly alive, not just surviving, but thriving. One of the most rewarding aspects of her journey was seeing how her work impacted others. During post-production, Angela spent hours in editing suites, helping to fine-tune scenes and ensuring the cultural nuances remained intact. She worked closely with sound designers, visual effects artists, and editors, explaining why certain moments needed to stay as they were or suggesting subtle changes that enhanced the story's authenticity. Her input wasn't always met with immediate agreement, but over time the team grew to trust her instincts. They began referring to her as the glue holding everything together, a nickname that made Angela smile every time she heard it. The cast, too, benefited from Angela's presence. Many of the actors, especially those speaking their native languages, appreciated having someone who understood their culture and could help them feel more connected to their roles. One actor, a rising star named Javier, approached Angela after a particularly emotional scene. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know if I could have done justice to this character without your guidance." Angela simply nodded, touched by his gratitude. Moments like these reminded her why she had fought so hard to be taken seriously. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making meaningful connections through storytelling, but not everything was smooth sailing. As the release date approached, pressure mounted within the production team. Deadlines loomed, budgets tightened, and tempers flared. Richard, despite his growing respect for Angela, still struggled under the weight of his responsibilities. He snapped at assistants, second-guessed decisions, and occasionally reverted to his old ways of dismissing ideas without listening. Angela watched him closely, recognizing the signs of stress and insecurity. Instead of confronting him directly, she chose to lead by example, staying calm and focused even when tensions ran high. Her patience paid off one evening during a heated argument over marketing strategies. The team couldn't agree on whether to emphasize the film's foreign roots or downplay them to appeal to broader audiences. Voices rose and frustration filled the room. Finally, Angela stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "This movie is about honesty," she said. firmly. It's about telling a story that respects its origins while inviting people from all walks of life to experience it. If we try to hide where it comes from, we lose what makes it special. Her words silenced the room. Slowly, heads began nodding in agreement. Richard, who had been pacing anxiously, stopped and looked at her. "She's right," he admitted, though reluctantly. From that point forward, the marketing team crafted campaigns highlighting the film's cultural richness, using taglines like "a story that speaks to everyone" and showcasing clips of multilingual dialogue. Early reactions were overwhelmingly positive, with critics praising the film's authenticity and heart. As the premiere drew closer, Angela prepared for another challenge, stepping into the spotlight. Though she had grown comfortable in her role, behind the scenes, the idea of attending red carpet events and giving interviews terrified her. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She wanted the film to shine. But Richard insisted she join him at press conferences and industry panels, arguing that her contributions deserved recognition. "You earned this," he told her one afternoon, his tone unusually gentle. "Don't shy away from it." Angela reluctantly agreed, but only after setting clear boundaries. She wouldn't talk about her personal struggles unless absolutely necessary. Instead, she focused on discussing the film's themes and the importance of representation in media. When reporters inevitably asked about her journey from cleaning lady to cultural consultant, Angela answered honestly but briefly, turning the conversation back to the project itself. "This isn't about me," she often said. "It's about the power of stories to bring people together." Despite her initial fears, Angela handled the media circus with grace. Audiences responded warmly to her humility and passion, calling her an inspiration. Social media lit up with posts celebrating her achievements, and hashtags like "TheAngela Story" trended worldwide. Strangers reached out to thank her for proving that talent and determination can break down barriers, no matter how insurmountable they seem. Back at home, Angela tried to keep things grounded. She continued living in her small apartment, refusing to let success change her core values. Friends and family urged her to splurge on luxuries or move to a fancier neighborhood, but Angela shook her head. "I'm happy where I am," she told them. Besides, there are more important things to focus on. What mattered most to Angela was using her platform to uplift others. She started volunteering at local community centers, teaching language classes to kids and adults alike. She partnered with organizations that supported underprivileged workers, advocating for better opportunities and fair treatment, and she mentored aspiring filmmakers, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to pursue their dreams fearlessly. "If I can do it, so can you," she would say with a smile. "All it takes is believing in yourself, and maybe a little bit of stubbornness." The night of the premiere arrived, and Angela stood nervously outside the theater, adjusting her dress. It was the first formal gown she had ever worn, borrowed from a friend who insisted she look the part. As cameras flashed and crowds cheered, Angela took a deep breath and stepped onto the red carpet. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the sea of faces and voices. Then she spotted Mia, the intern she had mentored, waving excitedly from the sidelines. Angela smiled, feeling a surge of pride. This moment wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had believed in her along the way. Inside the theater, the lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. Angela watched intently, tears welling up as she saw her translations come to life on the big screen. Every word, every phrase, every detail she had poured her heart into was right there, shining brightly. When the credits rolled, the audience erupted into applause, standing to their feet in admiration. Angela glanced at Richard, who clapped alongside everyone else, a rare smile on his face. In that moment, she forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she no longer needed to hold on to anger. She had already won. After the premiere, invitations poured in from festivals, universities, and cultural institutions eager to honor Angela's work. She accepted some, declining others to maintain balance in her life. Through it all, she remained humble, reminding herself daily that her journey was far from over. There were still battles to fight, injustices to address, and stories to tell. But for now, she allowed herself to celebrate, not just her success, but the ripple effect it created. Because Angela knew something many people didn't. The world doesn't need perfect heroes. It needs ordinary people willing to stand up, speak out, and prove that greatness exists in unexpected places. And sometimes all it takes is one brave act to inspire countless others. The months following the film's release were a whirlwind of excitement and change for Angela. The movie became a critical and commercial success, earning accolades at prestigious award ceremonies and resonating deeply with audiences around the world. Critics praised its heartfelt storytelling, cultural authenticity, and universal themes, often singling out Angela's contributions as pivotal to its impact. For someone who had once been invisible in the shadows of office hallways, Angela found herself basking in a spotlight she never thought possible. Despite the newfound fame, Angela remained grounded. She continued waking up early, drinking her favorite cup of coffee, and reflecting on how far she'd come. Her mornings were quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of her evenings filled with interviews, events, and speeches. Yet amidst all the noise, Angela held on to one truth. This wasn't about her. It was about proving that anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, could achieve greatness if given the chance. One of the most profound moments came when Angela received an invitation to speak at a global education conference. Standing before hundreds of teachers, students, and policymakers, she shared her story. Not just the parts about translating scripts or working with Richard Langston, but also the struggles that shaped her. "I didn't start out wanting to be extraordinary," she said, her voice steady and warm. "I just wanted to survive. But somewhere along the way, I realized surviving isn't enough. We have to thrive. And thriving means using whatever gifts we've been given to make the world better." Her speech moved people to tears, sparking conversations about equality, access to education, and the importance of recognizing untapped potential in overlooked communities. Schools began implementing programs inspired by Angela's journey, encouraging students to embrace their unique talents and pursue careers they might otherwise think were out of reach. Teachers reached out to thank her, sharing stories of kids who suddenly believed in themselves because of her example. Angela saved every message, reading them whenever doubt crept in. Meanwhile, Richard Langston underwent his own transformation. Though he still carried traces of his old arrogance, he became more mindful of how he treated others. He started mentoring young filmmakers from diverse backgrounds, crediting Angela for opening his eyes to the value of inclusivity. During a televised interview, he publicly acknowledged her role in the film's success, calling her the heart and soul of the project. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for him, and while some critics dismissed it as a publicity stunt, Angela knew it came from a place of genuine growth. Their relationship evolved into something resembling friendship, or at least mutual respect. Richard occasionally sought Angela's advice on future projects, valuing her perspective not just as a linguist, but as someone who understood human connection. They weren't close friends, nor did Angela expect them to be, but there was a sense of understanding between them now. Both had learned valuable lessons from each other, even if neither would admit it openly. As time passed, Angela expanded her efforts beyond the film industry. She founded an organization called Voices Unseen, dedicated to empowering individuals from marginalized communities to share their stories through art, writing, and media. The nonprofit offered workshops, scholarships, and mentorship programs, creating pathways for people whose voices had long been silenced. Angela poured her energy into the initiative, traveling across cities and countries to spread its mission. Wherever she went, she reminded people that everyone has a story worth telling, and that those stories can change lives. Her work caught the attention of influential figures eager to support her cause. Celebrities donated funds, politicians endorsed her initiatives, and grassroots movements embraced her vision. But Angela never let the attention go to her head. She stayed true to her roots, often returning to the building where it all began. Sometimes late at night, she'd walk through the empty hallways, remembering the days when cleaning those floors felt like her only purpose. Now, those same floors seemed symbolic, a foundation upon which she had built something remarkable. One Evening, during a fundraising gala for Voices Unseen, Angela stood on stage accepting an award named after her. As she looked out at the crowd, she spotted familiar faces. Mia, now a successful screenwriter, her mother, wiping away tears of pride, and even Richard, clapping enthusiastically from the back row. Angela smiled, feeling overwhelmed by gratitude. "This is not my victory," she said softly, her voice carrying across the room. "It belongs to everyone who refused to let the world define them, to everyone who dared to dream bigger than their circumstances, to everyone who proved that intelligence, talent, and kindness know no boundaries." When the applause finally faded, Angela stepped off the stage and mingled with guests, listening to their stories and offering words of encouragement. A young woman approached her timidly, holding a notebook similar to the one Angela had carried years ago. "I want to be like you," the girl whispered. Angela placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "You already are," she replied. "Just keep going." That night, as Angela walked home under the stars, she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew challenges lay ahead. There would always be obstacles to overcome, battles to fight, and doubts to conquer. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Countless people now stood beside her, inspired by her courage and determination. Together, they formed a chain of hope, passing it forward to future generations. In the end, Angela's story wasn't just about Nishi, a comeback. It was about transformation. Herself, Richard, the film team, the audiences, all of them had been changed, in some way, by the ripple effect of her actions. What started as a single act of defiance against mockery grew into a movement that challenged stereotypes, broke down barriers, and celebrated the beauty of diversity. And though Angela knew the fight for equality was far from over, she took solace in knowing she had done her part to move the needle. As she unlocked the door to her apartment and turned on the light, Angela glanced at the framed photo on her wall. It was a picture of her father, taken years ago before illness stole him away. His smile radiated warmth and wisdom, reminding her of why she had fought so hard, to honor his memory, to provide for her family, and to prove that dreams, no matter how distant, are always worth chasing. With a contented sigh, Angela sat down at her kitchen table, opened a fresh notebook, and began jotting down ideas for her next chapter. After all, the best stories never truly end. They simply evolve, inspiring others to write their own.